2022 is a year that I think is going to be critical for the success of Conan Exiles in the future. The game has been around for a good few years now, and it's been through a lot of different stages. The game has experienced popularity in early access, new DLC and content drops, content droughts in the run-up to the Isle of Siptah, and now with Update 3.0 looming on the horizon, 2022 could be the year when Conan Exiles finally achieves greatness. Though Conan had a reasonably successful launch peaking at around 53,000 players, it's always been a bit of an issue keeping people playing in the long term. At least this is the case for PC, all of the numbers are based on PC Steam stats. After each large spike in players, the average daily always peters out, though on average it has been improving somewhat. Mid-2018 to about early 2020 was roughly the best patch for consistent player numbers, though fluctuation is quite common to see. Conan Exiles is reasonably well known, and the core issue is that it struggles to retain players in the long term, as people leave due to bugs, burnout, lack of content, or a combination of factors. Perhaps one of the biggest issues that has faced Conan in recent memory has been the massive content drought surrounding the Isle of Siptah. This update drummed up a lot of excitement at the time and hopes were definitely high. However, unfortunately it seemed that Funcom struggled to balance working on the update whilst communicating with and giving new content to the player base. PC players received an early access Siptah that felt empty, often waiting months between new updates to the map. Console players honestly had it worse. They were sat idly by, praying that Siptah would release soon enough. Of course, this huge delay can also be put down to the pandemic changing the way work at the Funcom offices had to be conducted. That's very much out of their control, but the cause of the disaffection plaguing the player base was the lack of content, and perhaps most importantly, a lack of any clear communication from Funcom. So Siptah finally releases to consoles on May 27th, 2021, with numerous large updates and changes to the map to make it more interesting and varied, with the game now also being released on Xbox and added to Xbox Game Pass, which is a great boon for player numbers, I'm sure. There are still complaints about Siptah of course, but Funcom do plan to actively work on it. For most, the wait didn't really seem to be worth it. However, it seemed all the time spent working away on this piece of content had changed some approaches within Funcom. The rarely updated Steam news section for the game that had sat barely touched for a good while began to light up fairly regularly with updates from Funcom about their appearances at Twitch Gaming Show, but the real turning point seemed to be the 3rd anniversary of the game. Rather than take the cold corporate approach of boasting player numbers and sales or anything like that, Funcom put together a statement thanking the community for sticking with them through the bumpy times, thanking all sections of the community and promising plenty more. This was followed fairly swiftly later the same month by an AMA with Dennis Duthet, the lead designer at Funcom, which seemed to indicate a real opening of communication between them and the community. From there, I think it's pretty fair to say that Funcom have continued to strive for improvement. They ran a free-to-play week for the game that included Twitch drops for watching streamers, contests, in-game events, new bug fixes and updates, rule and mechanic changes to foster a healthier environment on official servers, and some honestly really interesting cryptic teasers and clues for future updates. Alongside that, Funcom seemed to take pride in showcasing the work of the people in the content creation community, including YouTubers, streamers, artists, comic creators and plenty more. In the reveal stream for People of the Dragon, which I have to say was very transparent about how Funcom work and how they decide what to put in each DLC, Funcom revealed in a Q&A section towards the end of the stream that they were already working on Update 3.0, and they didn't say much apart from it would be a massive update, and told us that future updates before 3.0 would focus heavily on bug fixes, updates and quality of life, something the community has been crying out for. Funcom's change in attitude is a very welcome one, and with what has been promised as a massive update on the horizon, combined with their rejuvenated approach to communicating with their players, things seem to be looking up for Conan Exiles throughout the latter stages of 2021. For now, in the early stages of 2022, things seem to be going according to plan for Conan so far. Updates seem to be coming out roughly every other month, targeting quality of life changes, bug fixes and mechanics that will make things smoother and cleaner for official servers. What's really important is that Funcom seem to be staying consistent in their somewhat unspoken promise of improving the game and the way they work. They've been communicating and interacting with the community pretty consistently, whilst also updating the game and fixing a lot of issues, which does seem to have garnered some good favour within the player base. Building these bridges was extremely important after the Siptah drought, and I think they've done a pretty good job so far in my estimation. Now, I personally estimate that Update 3.0 will be dropping around the middle of this year maybe a little earlier. I hate to speculate, but there are pretty much no solid details on Update 3.0 to keep it as a surprise, so all we can do is estimate. If what Dennis said is true, that Update 3.0 is going to be massive, maybe it could finally be the content drop that makes Conan Exiles stand out in the survival market. As I mentioned before, Conan has pulled in new players fairly regularly, but getting them to stick around has always been something of an issue, and to a degree I can see why. If you don't really love building, role-playing or PvP, the general gameplay cycle and endgame PvE experience definitely leaves something to be desired. Conan has massive potential for content in the future that would flesh out the game and give players a reason to keep coming back over and over again, outside of just stockpiling resources and stopping their base decaying. Players need interesting and active content to keep coming back, and whilst I might not be a fan of titles like Ark or Rust, they've clearly added enough content in their niche to keep people playing. I think Funcom can afford to learn a lot about Ark and Rust, and even certain MMOs that continually add content that can be replayed and optimised over and over again. That's the way you keep players coming, and I think that's the approach Funcom is going to go with eventually. I know certain elements of the community feel scorned by Funcom after long periods of silence and ignorance in the past. It's understandable, really, but I genuinely think they've gone a decent way to regaining some of that good faith, and there are definitely reasons to be optimistic in the future. Conan Exiles has always had ridiculous potential to be one of the titans of the survival genre, and it's never quite reached it, but with Funcom's new attitude and promises of massive revolutionary updates in the future, maybe 2022 could really be Conan's year.